Merkel Media.
I'm exhausted, looking for everything in the shadows. Start looking at people like they don't matter. I'm waking up to the fact, more than a little bit shallow. I'm lost in this hole, but I don't wanna. I'm lost in this hole, 'cause I'm just trying to
What's up, guys? I'm glad to be back with you for another week of Free the Rabbits. And today we're going to get into cloning and skin suits, specifically skin masks. And we'll probably go into that aspect of this first before we get into cloning. Now, just a caveat, I have talked about cloning before on this show, but I talked about specifically REM cloning or REM cloning that happens during REM sleep, which is a different type. And we talked about what is said to happen during that period of REM sleep and how that the consciousness is being moved by entities into other bodies or clone bodies. And some of this is on the backs of some of the things that Donald Marshall has said over the years. Some of it is more in line with what some of the abductees today are having. Completely different subject. This is going to be specifically about skin mask and cloning, and it will target celebrities. And we're going to talk about why that's significant, what it could mean. Also, I'm going to give you my take towards the end of it like I normally do. So just because I'm talking about some things up front in this episode, it doesn't mean that I wholeheartedly believe everything I'm giving you. It just means here's the research. Now I'll give you my opinion on it. I know sometimes people will listen to 10 minutes of an episode and flip out over something because they think that I believe wholeheartedly the research that I'm presenting. No, it's research. The point of doing actual legitimate research is to look at all angles of it and then come with your conclusion. Very similar to like I did during the Aliens Are Demons episode where I presented extraterrestrials, then I presented the Fae, then I presented the idea of the homunculus, then I told you what I thought about it. It wasn't that I believed some of these things wholeheartedly up front. It's just that I need to be able to look at all angles of it and then say, well, this is what I think. And part of what brought this on was definitely some of the stuff that's been going on in the news, been circulating on X and social media about face masks and people playing the part of celebrities. And we're going to talk about that up front here. And also this idea that fallen angels are pretty much every celebrity in Hollywood. And I found that very interesting / humorous at the same time. And again, I'll give you my idea on that at the very end of this, and I'll tell you if I think it's got any validity to it or not, because I do think there are nuggets of truth in some of these theories. The problem is, and this is the entire basis of the show, is that people just go too far. It's like EGI or elite gender inversion. every single person in Hollywood or athletics or politics is all some gender inversion. And it's just not. It doesn't mean that there aren't cases of these things going on, because I think we can look to certain things with verifiable data or enough circumstantial evidence to say, hey, you know what? This is what I think it could be. But we've got guys out here that have major accounts that are pushing on people that some of this stuff is verbatim a fact. And they'll tell you that with the smuggest look. Oh, it is. Oh, it is. And they don't know any more than I know or you know. We can speculate all day, guys, but unless the speculation has something grounded in some sort of research or writings throughout history, something we can look to, it's literally just make-believe. And it's not to say that there couldn't be some, again, aspects of truth to it. It just means that we've got to start sifting through some of this stuff better. Specifically as Christians, a little bit more discernment before we just start buying into anything that comes along that sounds good. And sometimes I just feel like that I'm alone in this ocean screaming in the wind because I'm literally the outcast of the outcasts. I don't belong in the mainstream. I don't fit in there. But then I come to the truth or conspiratorial world and I still question a lot of things there too. And because of that, I don't find myself fitting quite in there either. But I'm sure there's a lot of people just like me. And I know that from people that reach out to me to listen to the show that are like, yeah, I just don't get on board with every crazy thing that comes along just because it's quote unquote anti-mainstream. It doesn't make it a fact. It just makes it sometimes a cool idea. But at least I hope that when I present things on this channel, that I'm looking at documents, I'm looking at the writings of alchemists, of occultists, of people who were part of secret societies, people that wrote biblical literature from both ends of it, right? Gnostics, Christians, all the in between, and say, look, I've got a foundation that supports this. It doesn't make it a verifiable fact in a lot of cases, but I have something to support this. I'm not just sitting here pulling stuff out and throwing it at the wall and hoping it sticks, but then telling people it's a fact. And that's the thing about the idea of cloning and skin suits, is that people will see things, and we're going to talk about this today, celebrities that look a lot like somebody in the past, and they'll say, that's them, and this is why. But you have nothing verifiable outside of the fact that they kind of look alike in some cases. Some cases they look more alike than others, and we'll talk about that today. But we've got to be better, guys. Got to be better. And I know there's probably somebody right now punching the air just by me saying this, because it's tearing up their paradigm that they've already created for themselves. So anyway, end of rant. We're going to jump right into this. And one of the guys I want to talk about initially is Jim Carrey. And if you're in the truth or conspiratorial world, I'm sure that the whole face mask, fake Jim Carrey thing that came out a few weeks ago, you're already privy to it. But I want to talk about that instance for sure, but I want to talk about Jim Carrey's past a little bit and why people think he might have been replaced, or there could be more to what's going on with him than people think initially. So most people know Jim Carrey. He's been in a ton of movies. He was probably one of the hottest comedy acts in the 90s. And he was one of the first comedy acts to ever receive upfront $20 million for a film. And that was after several movies that most people know: Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, Batman Forever. And then when he went into Cable Guy in 1996 was when he started getting paid that $20 million upfront for a film. Now, he still put out a ton of big time movies after that, which many people know. And then he started getting into films that were a little bit more on the dramatic side, because he's actually a really good dramatic actor. And the first movie that people will remember him playing in a dramatic role was The Truman Show. And The Truman Show to me is very interesting, right? The whole idea of The Truman Show is being trapped in a matrix, being trapped in a bed of lies since you were born, controlled by the oppressors. And most people will remember Truman Burbank and how that the company that bought him, the production company, essentially bought him, adopted him when he was a child. So they create this whole fantasy life around him, and they create these scenarios throughout his life that keep him on this island called Sea Haven Island. And they will have crazy stuff happen, like his father dies in the ocean in a boating accident. So it causes him to have this fear of going out in the ocean. And all the people around him, including his wife, they feed that fear, so he doesn't want to leave, right? Then he falls in love with this lady named Sylvia, but she was just an extra, and they have to fire her. They create a whole scenario why she's gone, because she ends up going to Fiji. Then he ends up marrying the woman that they want him to marry. Long story short, what ends up happening, he ends up figuring this out because he runs into another extra that ends up being his father. It's the same guy playing the part. They end up bringing his father back from the dead, quote unquote. Essentially, he had amnesia after this boating accident and forgot who he was. But Truman ends up, through all this, figuring out what it is. He tricks them. He gets on a boat, goes out across the water. They try to stop him. They create a storm. It reminds me of geoengineering, some of the things we talk about with storms now. And there's so many conspiratorial tropes within this. He ends up getting out and leaving. And the really funny part is all these people that are watching the show, because it's a show that's on 24 hours a day that people are allowed to watch. And they're all cheering for him to get free. And when he gets free, they literally just turn the channel and start watching something else. So that's the interesting part. And it's a tight correlation to society, how that society wants you to be free or pretends like they want you to be free. But in actuality, it's all just for entertainment. And it's the idea of our lives, our entertainment, to the people who are in control, or at least on the outward that look like they're in control, right? Again, I'm a Christian. I believe that God is in control. So I have a different outlook on what my place is when it comes to the end game, or when it comes to these elites, whoever else. They're not controlling me. They may have the ear of the prince of this earth, and he may have some level of control over things, but he doesn't have control completely. That's God, that's Yahweh, that's who is in control of everything. And as a Christian, that's who I believe is ultimately the trump card over anything that the devil may try to purvey. But that's kind of the basis of this movie. And it's interesting because you'll find that Jim Carrey finds himself in a lot of different conspiracies off and on, or at least talking about them throughout his life. Now, in April 3rd of 2009, he and Jenny McCarthy go on the Larry King Live show. And Larry King Live was an American TV and radio host, author, and spokesman. And he had this show since 1978, but then CNN ended up pushing it to broadcasting. And then he actually went into the Larry King Now show from 2012 to 2020. That was like on Hulu and RT America and some of these other places until he passed away in 2021. But they go on this show and they start talking about Jenny McCarthy's child and how he had autism. This is when autism really started becoming a thing. People started questioning why all these kids were getting autism. Now, I'm going to play a clip from the Larry King show that they're on. Now, obviously, if you're on YouTube or Rumble, you'll get to see it, but you'll get to hear it if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere else. But it's very interesting what they have to say about what they think about where this autism's coming from. This is kind of the first big shot that Jim Carrey kind of throws out there. And he seems to be in the know about a lot of things. And at least on the surface, he seems to be fighting for the people. And this is again, this is where we're going to get into the skin suit idea and all that. So I'm going to play this clip for you and then we'll talk about it.
Yesterday, the world was World Autism Awareness Day. You both must be encouraged by all that's happened in this subject since you literally started it.
Yeah, you know, we've come a long way within the community. When I first had Evan diagnosed with autism, there wasn't much of anything. I had to find out about biomedical treatment on the internet after I typed in autism on Google. And out 3 years later, now there's 3 books and many thousands of children getting better because of biomedical treatment.
Jenny brought so much focus to this problem. And kind of that's why I'm here, is I want to bring as much focus as we can to this problem.
You married autism. Or, well, you're not married, so you live with autism.
When I invited Jenny into my life, I invited Evan into my life. And when I first met Evan, he was like he was on another planet. I wasn't in the room. There was no eye contact. There was no response to dialogue. There was no affection. And over time, I witnessed Jenny pull Evan through the window of unconsciousness and isolation into our world, where he is now a fully functioning person who can communicate, who can connect, and this is through biomedical treatments, GFCF diet, and the therapies that she's talking about. So I believe that autism, in my heart, is preventable
and treatable.
Fully functional.
He's completely recovered, Larry, completely recovered. And he's not the only one. There are thousands in this community that are getting better.
Why did you go so publicly? I mean, you had an autistic child. He got better. So why are you here?
I could have, hid and not said anything, and Evan would have blended into society. I made a pact with God, though. The day Evan became diagnosed with autism, I said, if you show me the way, God, and show me how to heal my boy, I will continue to teach the world how I did it. And within 1 year of that kind of conversation with God, Evan was undiagnosed from autism.
But it's still shocking to see how many people are ignoring this information.
The American Academy of Pediatrics, I begged and have sat down with and said, why are you not sitting down with our doctors and our scientists who are treating and recovering children with autism? And they refuse to this day to sit down.
I think if there was any possibility that a child was being helped, that someone would listen, someone would take a look. And the fact is, they're not even considering the information. They're not only not considering, they're discouraging it.
But you've had a major effect. Big story in the LA Times last week. Number of kids not being vaccinated in public schools in Los Angeles. However, at the same time, a doctor friend told me today, mumps are up and measles are up.
We're not saying don't. That's the thing we want to get really clear right now with.
Yeah,
this is the thing. There's a lot of misdirection going on. We hear the Campbell Browns and people like this that are saying, you can't not. No one has ever suggested not.
Go back to the 1989 schedule when shots were only 10 and the MMR was on that list. I don't know what happened in 1990. There was no plague that was killing children that we had to triple the amount of.
What happened after 1989?
The
why did they
It warranted 26 more.
Agreed.
Are all of them absolutely necessary?
Because they want to make money.
Of course. Back in 1989, the shot schedule was 10 shots given.
10 shots given.
When I was a kid, what did we get? 3?
It's twice as many as anywhere else in 30 countries in the Western world.
But
we give twice as many shots as any of those countries. Why is that?
If it's and you're not against, well, what are you against? Don't for this, but for that.
Yes.
I think we have to choose which ones are absolutely necessary.
You should educate yourself. We want to empower parents to educate themselves. Do we need to have the chickenpox? Do we need the hepatitis B shot on the second day of life?
I don't think we can afford to assume that the people who are charged with our public health any longer have our best interests at heart all the time.
So, yeah, according to Jenny McCarthy and Jim Carrey, Jenny McCarthy's child had autism. Now, they were able to work him through a lot of that, and that was part of the reason why they're becoming vocal advocates. But one of the main things you heard them say was what? There are an innumerable amount of jabs that these children have been getting, and they keep skyrocketing. I can say that now as a parent. I can tell you both of my kids, they're out of high school now, and they have moved on with their lives as far as that part of it, right? But I can tell you my son was in high school just a few years ago, and they were trying to force certain things on him, and we were able to push back against that. There are things you can do. They will tell you that it's mandatory, right? But there are things you can do if you don't trust what it is that they're telling you to do. Obviously, do research, talk to people who know about these things, because I don't believe that all jabs are bad, right? And you'll hear Jim Carrey and Jenny McCarthy say the same thing. It's not about that it's all bad. But I can say that there has been a huge, massive uptick. And what's happened? There have been children with autism and other things that have caused complications with children. And we can only speculate, but it does look odd, right? It doesn't look like it's quite adding up. And this is kind of one of the things that Jim Carrey was really pushing. So another instance happens on the Jimmy Kimmel Show on November 14th, 2014. And I'm going to play that clip now. We're going to talk about it.
Please say hello to Jim Carrey. Thank you for coming. What is that exactly? Is that a gang sign? Have you,
Oh, like you don't know what it is. You don't know what that is.
I have no idea.
You don't know. Jimmy Fallon doesn't know. David Letterman doesn't know.
We don't know.
All the comics and show business don't know what this is. Right? Yeah.
What is it?
Come on, Jimmy. Seriously, the time is up. People are hip to this kind of stuff. I'm here tonight to blow the lid off it, to be the whistleblower. I'm sick and tired of the secrets and the lies. It is the secret symbol of the Illuminati, and you're a part of it, and it is the all-mocking tongue.
Oh, I like it. You can use a
It's
scraping.
the symbol of the all-mocking tongue. And I'm sick of it. I want everybody to be in on the joke, man. You know what I mean? Like, for years now, talk show hosts, people on television, people in sitcoms have been hired by the government to throw you off the track, to distract you, to make you laugh and stuff like that, make you happy and docile so you don't know what's really going on. You know, when they get out there in the woods in a circle naked and they decide these things, and, you know, and you know, look at him trying to come it out. It's hilarious. And, you know, and I'm sick of, hold on a second. You know what they're trying to do?
Who?
This thing is buzzing. Hold on. They're trying to turn us into, you know, consumer drones of some sort. Hold on, I just got to get this.
And yeah.
Yeah, listen, I'm in the middle of blowing the lid off some.
What happened?
I'm sorry, Jimmy. I was temporarily interrupted by my iPhone 6 Plus. That's 5.5.
That's a big one, huh?
5.5 heads-up HD display. I think what I was really trying to say was I think people really enjoyed Dumb and Dumber this weekend.
And that is what I thought you were about to say.
They should all go to the theater. They should all go to the theater tomorrow and see it.
They should.
Because we could use a good laugh. Ha, 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 ha.
So here's Jim Carrey. He comes out and he's throwing up what many people will consider to be the all-seeing eye. Now, obviously, he's doing it in a mocking way. He's flipping his tongue through it. He's calling it the Illuminati. You can tell that Jimmy Kimmel feels very uncomfortable. You can watch him in the clip when he first starts doing it. And then he tells Jimmy Kimmel, you know what I'm talking about. What are you talking about? You know, come on. You're part of it. And we could all say he's just joking, and maybe he is, right? I always put that caveat in anything when we're talking about it, right? Because people are very quick to say, "We're showing you it's in plain sight." And maybe, and in a lot of cases, yes. But we always have to leave that section of doubt there. We just can't say that's it, right? Again, back to there's too many people running around in this space that think they know everything, and none of us know a whole lot. We may be well-researched people, but it doesn't mean that we have the verbatim answer. He's obviously referring to the Illuminati, and this tracks back to the Bavarian Illuminati started by Adam Weishaupt. I've talked about that specifically on this show. I haven't gone into super depth about the Bavarian Illuminati, and maybe I do that on one of the shorter episodes I put here on YouTube and Rumble. But he is referring to a version of it, right? At least more of the modern incarnation where it's more about the New World Order and people who are masterminding events and conspiring to control world affairs, those type of things. And that's basically what he is talking about. But a lot of people pointed to that instance and said, man, Jim Carrey has really been coming out and pushing against some of this stuff. At least it seems like it, right? And I'm always of the thought pattern too, that sometimes these guys are a part of these groups and they're told to do this because it's part of this giving us what they're doing, showing us back to the in plain sight. So again, I'm not against that, but we have to throw that caveat out. But we're building this narrative into Jim Carrey and why people think he could be replaced, and subsequently other celebrities as well. So in July of 2015, Jim Carrey's back on the jabs again. So he gets really hot with California Governor Jerry Brown. And Jerry Brown is an American lawyer, author, and politician, and he served as the 34th and 39th governor of California. So his first run was from 1975 to 1983, and he had a second run from 2011 to 2019, and that's when, in 2015, that Jim Carrey had a big problem with him. So there was a new jab law that went into effect, and it made several of them mandatory for all school children, regardless of religious and personal beliefs. So Carrey goes insane. He basically is like, this is fascism at its finest. And honestly, it's probably one of the few times that you'll hear the word used correctly. It's definitely fascism to force people to do things against their own will and against their religious and personal beliefs, especially in a country that we tout to be a country of the free. We tout to be this country who is open to people's beliefs and how they want to operate. So yeah, he came out pretty hard against it. And part of this was that Carrey believed that these jabs contain harmful chemicals and compounds, including mercury and thimerosal. And he said that these jabs cause children to be high at risk for mercury poisoning. He also called the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention corrupt and them not being able to solve this problem. And he said he would rather not give a child these things because they have these components in them, specifically because of also what he had went through with Jenny McCarthy and her kid several years before that. So he was highly against this. He went pretty hard against Governor Brown. Now, obviously, the mainstream tried to make him look bad for that, like they do anybody who questions what the authorities have to say or the science, right? So he was ostracized for that in a way, but then obviously there were a lot of people that applauded him for it because they said, hey, this is right. There's something not right going on here. Why is there even more of an uptick? And it seems to be like every 5 years, there's more of an uptick, more things that children need to take throughout their lives. And why is that? You know, there's the idea that there are things that are good for us to take, but why has the uptick shot up to a level that it's incomprehensible in some ways? And I understand where his point was. So this is giving you an idea of some of the things that Jim Carrey was speaking out against or speaking about or shedding light on throughout his career. So now we're moving to this year of 2026, and Jim Carrey receives the honorary César Award at the 51st César Awards ceremony in Paris, France. And this was on February 26th of 2026. And it's very similar to the Oscars. So it'd be like him getting a French Oscar. It was more for a Lifetime Achievement Award. And during this, he has an interview afterwards. And this is the one that's been doing the rounds. I'm going to play that now so people who haven't seen it can see what I'm talking about. And then we're going to break that down.
Bonjour. Bonjour. Oh, it's a wonderful feeling. I really took on a pretty big challenge trying to do my speech in French. So, I wrote it and I researched it and I practiced it like crazy. But, it's, then I watched everybody like talking 1,000 miles an hour up there receiving their awards. And I was like, I'm dead. And I made mistakes and I was like a novice, but I felt a lot of love. And I felt a lot of appreciation that I tried, and what I said was true. And I really wanted to recognize my family. I wanted to recognize my dad. I mean, my dad was the type of person that if you met him for 5 minutes, you felt like you knew him for 50 years. I can't talk about him without getting emotional. Oh, loved it. It's so beautiful. And having Michelle, Camille Coton was also amazing. And it was just a brilliant evening, really brilliant evening. Oh my gosh. Benjamin Laverne was off the hook. I mean, I can't believe he committed to doing all that. I was really, is this about someone else? My favorite funny face is the one I'm wearing right now.
Thank you so much, Jim.
So yeah, a lot of people had questions about that. They said, is that actually him? And I'll show you some pictures now that show that the eye tones are different colors. Now, some people are suggesting that he was in different lighting for these pictures. Maybe, I'm not outside of the realm of possibility. And we're going to talk about Dr. Terry Dubrow here in a second and what he has to say about it. I'm not against the idea of there being something like plastic surgery going on here or whatever, right? But something's off and he doesn't quite sound the same. And maybe it's because he's getting older, and I'm going to throw that out there too. But there are just some things that don't quite look right. And I'm also going to show you a picture from 2024. And this is honestly, he looked kind of the same there. And it makes you wonder if, again, big if, he was replaced. How long ago was it? It might have been a lot further back than you think, specifically because I pulled these pictures up of his birthday party in 2024. Now, I do want to talk about Dr. Terry Dubrow, and he's an American plastic surgeon and television personality. And he's been on shows like Botched and Botched by Nature, Real Housewives of Orange County. So he is big in the world of plastic surgery. Now, he actually speaks on it. First off, he says that people need to leave Jim Carrey alone and Bradley Cooper alone because he's also been getting hit up about having plastic surgery or whatever else that people believe is going on there. So he says people should just understand that he got this award and praise him for it. And it's like, yeah, sure, that's nice to hear, Mr. Plastic Surgeon who's on a ton of shows, who makes a ton of money, who's tied in with everyone else who's a celebrity. Like, we're just supposed to automatically believe you. But maybe you're right. Maybe it is. And he did mention that he thinks that Carrey may have gone under the knife. He may have had a facial procedure because he's talking about his face was swelling. And he said a lot of times that happens right before you have some sort of facial procedure, Botox or whatever else. And after a period of time, it will move into what it was originally supposed to look like. Again, possibility. But here was the big wrench in it. So everybody was pulling up pictures of old Jim Carrey from not that long ago either and comparing him to this Jim Carrey. And there just seemed to be some things off. Well, there was a drag queen called Alexis Stone. And Alexis Stone does a lot of different impersonations like Lana Del Rey, Dolly Parton, Jack Nicholson. You should see the Jack Nicholson one. It's pretty wild. It's very spot on. He does Adele, Madonna, a ton of different ones. It makes you think that there is a place for an actual replacement, or I think that some of these celebrities have body doubles. And I think some of those body doubles use prosthetics. And I think they do that so that they can have some level of being anonymous in some way still, right? And I think this happens more often than you think when it comes to high profile celebrities and them having body doubles. We know that some of them do. We know that some of them talked about them having them. And I know Eminem had one for years, and they used to use him to distract people so the real Marshall Mathers could go and operate over on a different side of the city or whatever else, right? So that's a possibility. But this drag queen, Alexa Stone, comes out and says that he was the one that was at Paris and the one that played Jim Carrey. So he shows this 3D scan of the actor's face alongside the mask itself and a set of false teeth and says, listen, this was me the whole time. This wasn't Jim Carrey. Well, obviously, people start pushing back against it. Why is this person coming out and saying this? Of course, all the mainstream reps picked it up. As a matter of fact, USA Today, this is hilarious, said they ran it through an AI image detector and said that it was 3% authentic. So 97% was false. And this is where we're coming to with the AI stuff, guys. And this is why that one thing we need to be real careful with of where AI is moving to is the fact that because AI movies are getting so good, because AI pictures are getting so good, that line between what somebody's done and what they haven't done is going to be almost virtually non-existent. I said this a few years back when AI really started picking up, that if some celebrity or politician gets caught doing something, they could easily say they didn't do it and it was AI that put out a video of them doing it. All they need is some sort of AI detection model to say that they didn't, even if they did. So this is, again, I thought this was interesting. The AI part to me was very interesting because that to me said, oh, so USA Today's coming out and saying there's only a 3% chance of this actually being real. So don't listen to Alexa Stone. It's fake. He just wants attention, which is true. It could be, right? It could be true. I'm not saying that it's not, but it just seems weird. Why would they want to cause this big to-do? Now, I know there's conspiracy theorists listening to me right now, and they're saying, well, yeah, it's a distraction. They're trying to cause a distraction. To some point, yeah. But every distraction has these morsels of truth that they're putting out there. So if you just completely push it to the side and act like it's not something that you need to be paying attention to at all, well, they're giving you the playbook constantly, even in these distractions. You know, it's like we talk about UFOs, UAPs, and aliens, and we're not talking about what those are today. I've talked about it a bunch on the show. But it's like when I talked about Project Bluebeam very early on in the show, and there's a large group of people within the truth or conspiratorial world that think it's all holograms. It's all Project Bluebeam. There's nothing real to it at all. And it's all a distraction. Well, to some degree, but I don't think it's all that. It can't be all that. And that's what we're getting to today when it comes to these skin suits and when it comes to cloning. I think there are levels of truth to this, but I also think that it's designed to really make us go haywire, to where all we're focusing on is this. So yeah, should you spend your entire focus and energy on Jim Carrey? No. Listen, when it first came out, I kind of pushed it to the side and said, I'll pick it up when I'm ready to do something on this. It wasn't something that I needed to focus on. I had enough of the details to get kind of an idea just of it. And I said, you know what, I'll revisit it when I'm ready to deep dive on it, when it's going to make sense for a project. And today's the day. So again, don't spend all your energy and focus on these things, but at the same time, log it in your file. Again, one thing you can take out of all this is the USA Today saying that 3% authenticity going through an AI image detector said that it's false. That to me was one of the biggest things I took away from it, was this is the reliance that we're having on AI to tell us if something's real or fake. So I told you I was going to show you a picture from 2024. Well, two pictures actually. And this was Jim Carrey's 22nd birthday. Now, he did a picture called The Last Supper. It's a play on the Last Supper of Jesus. So they're already mocking Jesus here. You'll see Jim Carrey in the middle. You'll see who's in there with him. Jimmy Kimmel's hanging out with him too. We've got several others. We've got David Spade there, Adam Sandler, a bunch of other guys. Howie Mandel's there, a bunch of guys who are for sure tied in to some nefarious things going on in Hollywood, who have had their names linked to people like Jeffrey Epstein. They're all hanging out with Jim Carrey. Now, this is the same Jim Carrey that people tout to be this man of the people, pushing back against the system. Well, if that's the case, one of two things is going on. Either he's just a tool for the machine and he's releasing information out as they tell him to do so they can, show you what they're doing to you while you're not believing it at the same time. Or this isn't him, that the real Jim Carrey was gone a while back and that this Jim Carrey is a completely different Jim Carrey. And with what has happened recently, we can say maybe, right? There's a possibility here. And I think we have to look at that. But I wanted to look at why that they would want to replace him. Because there's several different reasons why, right? So Joe Biden's another big example. And we'll talk about him briefly here. And everybody at this point knows who Joe Biden is. He was the last president before Donald Trump. But Joe Biden was one of the oldest living U.S. presidents since the second inauguration of Donald Trump in 2025. And he was the oldest living former U.S. vice president since the death of Dick Cheney in 2025. And he's also the oldest person to have served as president. And I tell you all that because it feeds into this narrative of, was Joe Biden the real Joe Biden in office when he was president, and even some of his vice presidency? These are questions that people have asked. And right now I'm going to show you some pictures that people will showcase whenever they say, hey, this ain't the same Joe Biden as the Joe Biden from 20 years ago. Now, the argument could be made as people get older, they do start looking different. And I can tell you that from people in my family. The older they get, they don't look the same as they did 20 years ago. And maybe, right, there's a possibility that's the case. There are some weird things about Joe Biden that are changing that I don't think should change on people, like eye color and, where your ears are at in your head and some of these other things. It makes it weird to where you have to start questioning some of this. Now, where it really starts getting interesting, and this ties into the Epstein files now. So if you'll remember QAnon and what they were saying about Joe Biden, and they were saying that Joe Biden was actually executed via Human Rights International Military Tribunal in 2019 for crimes against children and humanity. And they said that they put a false Joe Biden in his place. And they said that this tribunal did this to several different people, the Obamas, the Clintons, the Bushes. We can go down the list, right? And, listen, I know that QAnon was a psyop. I guess there's still some people that follow QAnon. And for the record, I know it's not QAnon. I know it's Q and Anons. And I know that the Anons get super worked up, but I just put it together because it's a psyop to me. And I don't believe that it was what they said it was. Now, I do think that it was some sort of three-letter agency by the Cass Sunstein effect that was funneling people information. And some of it was very true. Some of it was. And that's what made it so compelling, was that some of the stuff coming out of it was right on the money. And then it would just go way off the rails. And this is one of those things where people thought that this was the same type of thing, that it was just going off the rails again. And they also talked about several people playing Joe Biden too. And oddly enough, one of the people they said that was playing Joe Biden during this time was who? Jim Carrey. And because Jim Carrey had done some SNL skits where he played Joe Biden on those SNL skits. So again, I'm not here to say if that's true or not. This is just the rumors that were circulating during this Joe Biden run. Well, here's a very interesting document that was just released as part of these Epstein files. And this is on the literal House of Representatives website. This is on house.gov. And part of this Epstein file, it says that Joe Biden was replaced in 2019. And I'm going to read it for you. Now, there is some cursing here, so I will block that out. And I will block it out on the YouTube and Rumble as well. But there is some stuff redacted in here too. So the stuff that's blacked out, if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, that's the stuff that was redacted that they gave us. So there are some names that are redacted here, but you'll know what I have taken out because you'll see the first letter of the curse word that's in there. But it says maritime law is coming and the selling and owning of humans and human souls is over. There's factual evidence on the methods of operation for how law and legal proceedings will work next. I do encourage you to watch the video and understand how common laws are going away. So blank, quit fiddling and call blank. Anytime I say blank, that's going to be a redacted word. And who has so much info that will incriminate you that when he deletes it, we'll find it on the quantum system that this great gentleman blank has made it very clear in the video above. Hint, Biden is not your current president. The mask malfunctions on Biden are getting worse each day on purpose. This will end badly for blank, who is posing with a clone on Facebook. The dude playing Biden ain't Biden. Real Biden, and they're not even spelling it right here, was an evil, sick, angry man who abused children, including his own children. That's an actor with a mask. We've been over this 1,000 times. It's never going to change. Biden is shot. 2019 firing squad. So this photo is also on the justice.gov, and it was a document included in the Department of Justice latest Epstein-related file release. It contains an extreme and unfound claim. They say unfound, but it was a part of the Epstein file releases. So it goes into detail here about how he was replaced by a body double wearing a mask. And you have to wonder, okay, so if it's not true, which it could very well not be, and according to the mainstream outlets when I was looking into it, that the DOJ repeatedly noted these bulk releases contain unfiltered junk submissions with zero validation or investigation backing. They said it's recycled conspiracy nonsense, not a court finding. The problem is it's coming out through the Epstein files. And it could be, listen, somebody could have hacked, thrown this stuff in there. I'm not putting that out of the realm of possibility. The problem is, why would they allow this to be released? Why did they redact names in it? We have to think about that. Guys, they redacted names in it. So they saw it, they redacted names in it, and put it out with the Epstein files. So a couple things. They could be playing on conspiracy theorist fears and the conspiracy theorist mind. It could be part of this Cass Sunstein effect where they're trying to manipulate you to think that Joe Biden was this body double that had an actor inside of a suit, and they want to have you chasing all these rabbit holes that there's no end to, right? It's a possibility. Or it could be something to it, and they're just putting it out there for you to see, but then they're saying, oh, this is unfounded. But they're putting it out with redacted names in it. That's the part that got me. If it's so fake, why did you redact the names? And you have to ask the question. But for me personally, I was highly against the whole military tribunal idea, which I still am to some degree, because I am not down with most of that line of thinking when it came to QAnon whatsoever. But in light of this new evidence, maybe something was really going on with Joe Biden, which I always suspected something was going on there. Listen, I'm not here to say for sure it was a skin suit, but it could be, right? It's a possibility. With technology the way they have it now and prosthetics as well as they're done now, it's highly possible. And the average person just doesn't look at people like that. When you're looking at someone and you see them on the news, you see them whatever else, most people aren't really looking at, he doesn't look the same as he did 5 years ago. You're going to have a few people that do, and then they put out this information, then everybody catches on to it. And listen, I'm not here to say one way or the other if Joe Biden, who we've seen for the past bit, was somebody in a skin suit or not. But there's some weird stuff going on there, and we can't just shun it and say, well, no, that's not the case, especially in light of the new information that just came out in the Epstein files. Regardless of what the mainstream outlets and the DOJ is saying, why are they even putting it out there? A couple of reasons I already said. It has to be for a reason. They're trying to let people either know this is something they're doing, or it could be that, they're trying to throw us down a million rabbit holes. So we are distracted by some things that they are trying to do. And I also think it's interesting, since Joe Biden went out of office, he's been rarely even seen. He was only seen 3 times in 2025, and he's only been seen once in February of 2026. And I'll show those pictures up there. He was spotted by some passengers at the Ronald Reagan National Airport, and he was taking a commercial flight to South Carolina for a Democratic Party event. So it's interesting that they put him on a commercial flight to be around some people so they could take some pictures and put it out there. Said, yeah, Joe Biden, he's still trucking around. He's still doing some stuff. Very interesting. Why would he be on a commercial flight? That's the one thing that keyed me off at, well, they definitely want you to see him. And he's still looking as skin suity as ever, in my opinion. So that's kind of the idea of skin suits. And those are 2 of your main people, specifically one right now, and then obviously one of the big ones for the past 4 to 5 years that people have talked about a lot. There's plenty more out there. There are websites dedicated to this. So if you want to go down that rabbit hole, or go on YouTube, there's plenty of YouTube videos where they really get into it. I'm more concerned with the why. The reason why that they would need to replace somebody like that, or the reason why they would want us to know about them doing something like this. And I think we've got some of these answers, but I think it also will funnel into this cloning idea too. And cloning is very interesting. And we'll talk about some things that have been known to be cloned. And then we're going to get into the actual nitty-gritty of what celebrities have been talked about being cloned. I'll let you know what I think about some of them. I think some of them are explainable, whereas some of them I'll say, I don't know, right? Maybe. There's a possibility. So we know that cloning is the process of producing individual organisms with identical genomes, either by natural or artificial means. And this artificial cloning of organisms is sometimes known as reproductive cloning. And what they'll do, they'll take a somatic cell, and that's a cell of a living organism, and it's other than any reproductive cells. And what they'll do, they'll take that cell and they will create a viable embryo when they connect it with an egg cell. And in 1996, Dolly the sheep was the first mammal clone from a somatic cell. And we'll talk about Dolly the sheep briefly today, guys. We're not going to get into that too much. And again, I would argue that Dolly the sheep was the first known mammal that they let us know about that they had actually cloned. But I also want to look at this government hearing on cloning in 2001. And there's some interesting verbiage here. And this was the first hearing before the Subcommittee on Science, Technology, and Space. And this was the first session. This was in May 2nd of 2001. Now, it starts with Sam Brownback, and he was an American attorney, politician, and diplomat, and he served as United States Senator from Kansas from 1996 to 2011, and he also served as the 46th governor of Kansas from 2011 to 2018, and he's a Republican, and you'll notice by some of the verbiage here that he would have definitely been right-leaning. And he comes out first in this hearing, and he is talking about the debates of the issue of human cloning. This is back as far as 2001, guys. And I'm actually going to show you here in a second a clip from a Australian 60 Minutes where they were talking about human cloning and how easy it would be to clone humans back in 1999. This is getting very interesting. So they're talking about the principles of cloning. Is it ethical? This is what it's all about. Is it ethical? And he said that many Americans share the belief and the efforts to create human beings by cloning mark a new and decisive step toward turning human reproduction into a manufacturing process in which children are made in laboratories to preordained specifications. So they're talking about specifically for organ harvesting. We can create these clones and we can just rip the organs out of them because they're not real people. So it doesn't matter. But they're talking about how that's highly unethical. Most of this hearing which, by the way, you can go read at congress.gov to pull the document. So a lot of these documents are up on these government sites. So it gets a little further when we're talking about children being made in laboratories, preordained for specifications. When I heard the preordained by specifications, it made me think of a book from 1931 called Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, which I own. And I encourage anyone to go read that book. And Aldous Huxley's a strange character himself because he was connected to a lot of occultists and guys who are part of secret societies. Gerald Heard's one of them. Aleister Crowley, he was very tight with too. Timothy Leary, who came later on, who was tied into MK Ultra and using psychedelics to tap into this spiritual world. All of this Aldous Huxley was tied into, and he was big on mescaline. He did that with Aleister Crowley. So his idea of the spiritual world was in line with many of these spiritualists and occultists. So he writes this book, Brave New World, and in that book, it talks about this intelligence-based social hierarchy. So in the book, what happens is they manufacture people in these laboratories, and they are designed to be in a certain social pecking order. So what they will do is they will mix certain components into the fetus of different ones that they're creating in the lab, and some of them will come out super intelligent, so they'll be in the upper class and they'll live in the upper tiers of this literal tier system that people are living in and they're born in. So I remember one point it was talking about people that were created to be janitors, essentially. They would mix alcohol in with it to dumb them down so they would be more fitting for that social lifestyle. So it's interesting that in this hearing in 2001, it's talking about children made in laboratories to preordained specifications. It's not just about organ harvesting. They're talking about people created for specifications. And another part of this hearing that really piqued my interest was the idea of live-born children that starts with creating cloned human embryos, and they will use these embryos for research or as sources of cells and tissues for possible treatment of other humans. So at that point, another guy comes in on the hearing, a Mr. Richard M. Dorlfinger, and he's the Director for Policy Development, Secretariat for Pro-Life Activities, and National Conference of Catholic Bishops. And he brings up that President Clinton set aside the recommendation for creation of research embryos. So Clinton was already putting this into play in the 90s. They were already working towards this. And come on, there are black op scientific operations that were already doing this prior, but this is to get it accepted by the mainstream. Because listen, 90s, early 2000s, people were not having it. People are a little more accepting now, for sure, outside of the people like you and me who are looking at this like Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. This is exactly what they're moving towards. And Dorflinger goes on further to say that for an embryo produced by cloning cannot even garner the respect that we all agree should be accorded to other human embryos, but is treated as a dangerous entity that must not be allowed to survive. How will we view any human clone who is ultimately born alive? Merely as an organ farm for others. So that was one of the big components of this hearing was what's ethical about this? If we're creating these clones, are they actually human? Do we consider them human? Well, they're clones of somebody human. Do they have thoughts? Do they have souls? Again, we're not going to get into the idea of host bodies for entities or the homunculus idea much today at all. This is just specifically about the ethics of cloning and also how that correlates to the celebrity. But they're talking about it right here, organ farms. And is that ethical to create something and then just utilize it for whatever means you want to? And if they had passed that, then in the mainstream, we would talk about people being cloned regularly. And then you got a whole nother set of circumstances on your hand. And not to say that, and we're going to listen to this clip here in a minute, because man, is it wild. That was in 1999 in 60 Minutes in Australia, where they were talking about they could clone human beings. They said, we can do it in a year or two. It would take us a year or two to get it done. We can do it, is literally what the scientist says. And you'll see this in a minute. And to jump quickly back to Dolly the sheep, because I found something really interesting here recently, very recently, that I hadn't discovered before, because Dolly was the first mammal that was cloned from an adult somatic cell. Matter of fact, she ended up having several lambs of her own, so she was able to reproduce. It wasn't like she was just created and then couldn't reproduce on her own. She could reproduce. So she was actually created at the Rosalind Institute in Scotland. And I heard Rosalind, I was like, man, I've done so much research on the Rosicrucians and the supposed bloodlines of Jesus. And I said, I wonder how close Rosalind Institute is to Rosalind Chapel. Oh, very close. They're both located in the village of Rosalind in Midlothian, Scotland, just 7 miles south of Edinburgh. And they're walking distance of each other within the same small village area. So you're kidding me, right? Rosalind Chapel, which supposedly holds all these secrets of the prior sign, the bloodline of Jesus, is literally walking distance from a cloning facility. Well, then, man, you really got to start thinking there, what are they working on behind the scenes to push to us one day? What are they going to say might be Jesus or of Jesus or of the bloodline of Jesus? I'm just saying there are endless possibilities of what they may try to hit us with from a deceptive angle on this whole entire end times narrative. I just thought that was absolutely insane, that here's this place that's like the hub for this idea that these Gnostics revere, and that they think that is this Holy Grail, literally the chalice, the Holy Grail. And walk right outside, you can walk down to Rosalind Institute where they cloned the first mammal. I'm just saying, got to think about the correlation there. So to get to this 60 Minutes Australia, where they talk a little bit about IVF and tie it right into cloning, I'm going to play this clip for you. And it blew my mind a little bit that they were talking about this in 1999. It's the first time I've run across this clip, but I'm going to play it for you, and then you can tell me what you think about it.
Strictly speaking, it would be legal to clone me, for example, tomorrow. And this is the place it's most likely to happen, a leading IVF clinic outside of New York. Behind those walls, there are people with the technology, the ability, and the desire to genetically engineer human embryos, to be the first in the world to successfully clone a human being.
There's no doubt that human beings will be cloned.
Dr. Jacques Cohen, a leader in his field, simply needs the approval of his clinic's ethics committee to make history. So if I had the money, you had the permission, you could clone me tomorrow.
Well, I wouldn't say tomorrow. It'll take a year or two. We could clone you probably within 2 years.
What you're seeing here is an actual cloning taking place at the research facility in Scotland that pioneered the technique. In theory, it's blindingly simple. Here, it's an animal, but just as easily, you can take a cell from a human. A scraping of skin will do. Then, get an egg from a female, remove the nucleus and fuse the two with a spark of electricity. And ta-da, you have an embryo.
Now tell me that's not wild. So it's not like he's telling her that he can't clone or it's going to take time to figure out how to do it. No, we can do it. We just need a year or two to get it done. It's not an easy process, or at least what they're telling us up front. They may have a whole different cloning process behind the scenes that's much quicker. But the fact that they're letting people know in 1999 they can do it, we got to consider all options with this cloning stuff. We have to consider that they have definitely been cloning people of importance. And again, to briefly tie in the idea of host bodies and the homunculus, essentially, yeah, I think that when these clones are created, I think something else is taken over them. And it wouldn't be fallen angels, because fallen angels cannot possess It would be these dead Nephilim spirits, these demonic entities that are looking for these host bodies. And maybe this is why that when people see someone look different after they've gone away for a bit and they come back and they are acting a little different, but they seem similar, it's because this entity has now taken that person's essence on board. A real person's gone, but they are mimicking this person, but they're also heightening other things that they want to manipulate people with, especially if they're a celebrity. They're going to play to people's desires. They're going to play to people's attention spans to lure them into whatever they want to give them, whether it's through entertainment, which they want to manipulate us to go along with certain ideals that they may bring along 5-10 years later, or if it's just to push you in a direction now to vote a certain way or react a certain way to something. And again, these are just ideas, but it does have some level of basis to it, considering there was a guy who came out in 2011 talking about this, Donald Marshall. Now, I've talked about Donald Marshall on this channel before a long time ago, but it's important to bring him up again because it's really funny. He has really started popping back up a lot over the past couple of years, whereas there were people before who, myself including, who really didn't buy into a whole lot of what he was saying. And listen, I'm not here to say that I believe everything he's saying now by any stretch. I don't know the guy, and I think he and I would differ vastly when it came to the spiritual world, what we think about God, and a lot of these things. But he knows something. Whether he is a part of what they do and he's being used as a tool to release information the way they want it to be presented, or if he was definitely a part of some sort of MK Ultra programming and they just programmed him to see certain things. Maybe in his world, a lot of these things are real, but they're not actually real. There's so much to it, so many layers to it, but on face value, we can talk about what he said that he saw and the celebrities that he interacted with. This is when really people started getting really hip to the idea of celebrity cloning and why they would want a celebrity clone. So he comes out in December of 2011 and he starts making these posts on Facebook. And he basically said he was a child and he was held captive by the Illuminati. And his parents gave him up when he was 5 years old. And he said that all of these celebrities and politicians and royalty, they're all kid lovers and they're abusing children. They're abusing clones. He talked about how that they would make a clone of somebody and they would abuse the clone. Well, the clone still has some sort of attachment to the original person. So by hurting the clone, you're actually hurting the original person too. And each clone down, the clone becomes less attached to the original person, but that clone is just a weaker version. And that's why they say that when you see multiple clones of a celebrity and the further down they get on the cloning system, that's why you're going to see more of the shorting out or acting weird. And again, a lot of that's speculation too, but we're going on what Donald Marshall has to say here. And one of the things that he talks about is he was a writer for a lot of these musicians. He said he wrote for Rihanna, Beyonce, Metallica, Gautier, so many different ones. And I don't know, right? We don't know what's true, what's not. We don't know what he thinks he did. We don't know what entities he was talking to that were telling him these things, right? MK Ultra can make you believe a whole lot. And that's why I am very open-minded to listening to people tell their story, right? We've got podcasts like The Confessionals, right, that my buddy Tony Merkel runs, and he lets people come on his show to tell their story. And I know some people will go 0 to 60 because they'll say, that's a bunch of junk. Why you have people on here tell this junk, these lies, whatever? How do you know it's a lie in their world? That's the thing you're not thinking about. People can have a reality that's in their world. That's not necessarily the reality of the real world around us. Very, very typical behavior in MK Ultra subjects is that their reality is their reality. It's what they saw, what they did, who they talked to, how that they were abused, but it's not the same as what everyone else is seeing around them. So yeah, what they were programmed to see or do, maybe even Donald Marshall, because he said he was MK Ultra programmed. Matter of fact, he says he is a clone. The version that's out now, the one that's online, is a clone. So he's not even the real Donald Marshall. He's just a clone. So again, according to him. But maybe this is all an MK Ultra program. Maybe he's been told this stuff. We don't know. But anyway, he says that he was in this underground cloning facility ran by Queen Elizabeth II. And he said that his family was already living in the cloning facility and they gave him away to them. Now, he said he was highly abused, but he also says that the operation is run by a collective consisting of the Freemasons and a group called the Vril Society. And he also said the Scientologists are also involved with this too. The Vril Society is interesting, and I've talked about them quite a few times on the show, at least in the past. And some people think that's where the Nazi Party stemmed from, because obviously we're talking about the occult, and the Vril Society is highly connected to that. And really the first mention of the Vril Society came through Vril, the Power of the Coming Race. And Edward Bulwer Lytton wrote that. And he was an English writer and politician. And this was back in the early 1800s when he was born. And he died around 1873. And he was well known for coining phrases like the pursuit of the almighty dollar, the pen is mightier than the sword, dweller on the threshold. So he was very well known as a writer, but he writes this book called The Power of the Coming Race. And just a brief overview, because I've gone into it more in depth. And I believe on the last cloning episode, I went to it in more in depth. But he talks about this guy who falls down this cave system, runs into this group called the Vrilya. And they can transmit information telepathically. They can put people to sleep. They can stop pain. And he says they look like angels. And that's the first signifier for me where I'm knowing where this is already going, because he says when he meets them, they look like angels. Again, this is a fictionalized book, but you know how these occultists work with occult blinds and how they work with Twilight language. They like to use fiction a lot of times, i.e. Aleister Crowley when he wrote The Moonshot. And we'll talk a minute what some of these theosophists thought about this book too. So he goes down there, he ends up falling for one of the women that are there, and they tell him about this all-permeating fluid called the Vril, and it's their source of energy that they're able to pull from to be able to tap into all these different abilities that they have. And they are religious, but they are deists, and this is a very Gnostic ideology. It's the existence of a creator God who does not intervene anymore after creating the universe. So most Gnostics believe this way, that we cannot connect to the Buthos or the one, the absolute. And obviously I've used the term monad plenty of times on the show, but this is the ideology of this Vrilya as well. So he ends up, this guy falls down the cave, adopting all their customs. And again, he falls in love with this woman there, but he has to leave because her father's not happy with this. So she takes him to the place where he fell down from. And he returns to the surface, and she tells him to warn that in time the Vrilya will run out of habitable space underground, and they will claim the surface of the earth, destroying mankind in the process if necessary. So it's interesting that these quote unquote angels are going to take over to a point that they may have to wipe mankind out. So this is the group that is underground that Donald Marshall is talking about, that is manipulating the human genome. So again, this book was written a long time ago in the 1800s. Donald Marshall is way more recent. And he is talking about this Vrilya along with the Freemasons and Scientology. And I mean, he's used the term Illuminati too. He's even talked about the reptilians as well. He's got a lot of different things mixed in there. So again, take everything with a grain of salt, but at the same time, give it some weight in the sense of there are some things that we have to pay attention to here, especially with what we've seen over the past 5 years with the uptick of technology and AI and what cloning could mean even to that. So Donald Marshall goes on to talk about these subterranean bunkers where this cloning is going on. And he says members of the Illuminati and they contain leaders from all around the world. He said typically the G20 world leaders will be there. And he said in those bunkers, according to Marshall, house what has become a highly lucrative network of celebrity cloning farms. Also made me think about what's been really popular in social media recently, the farms. And I know if you're in any type of deep rabbit hole, you probably heard of the farms. And this is connected to the Soylent Green movie of Charlton Heston. And that's a wild movie. It kind of reminds me of They Live. Is one of those old school conspiratorial films. And now you're looking back at it like, that could have been true. It could be true now. So it essentially was, you had a very small elite cast of people who lived well and everyone else did not. And they all had to eat the same thing. There were these wafers that were supposedly made out of plankton, but Charlton Heston starts digging into things and finds out that plankton has been extinct for years. And that what was actually going on, it was human beings that they were using to make the wafers out of. So people were actually eating people. So that's when you'll hear people talk about, you went down that Soylent Green rabbit hole. Well, that's what it means. So the farms is what's also going around all the rounds of social media right now. The farms, and what are they? Cloning farms that are creating what? Clones for us to eat. And that's where people come up with these ideas of certain fast food restaurants and certain food establishments that are pushing out what they're saying is one thing, but it's actually another. And listen, I'm going to say this. I give everything a possibility. I do think people can go too far with things sometimes and make it out to be everything. But I do think we need to be aware of the idea that it could be going on. Hey, listen, if they can clone people, which we know they can, they were already talking about it back in 1999. That's in the mainstream. We know they can clone people. Listen, they wouldn't even need to clone somebody to be intelligent or anything. You just clone a meat sack to harvest or to quote unquote feed people. I mean, there are so many angles to this when you look at cloning. It's not just about cloning people of importance. There are so many other uses that they could use cloning for. So let's get into a few of these celebrity clones, right? Let's talk about some of their stories. Let's see if there's any validity to them. And then I'll wrap it up by going through some of the lookalikes, tell you what I actually think about all this cloning and what people are saying about it and what I truly think about what's going on here. So Avril Lavigne's a big one. Oh man, it's a classic story. And really the idea was that in 2002, she released her album, Let Go. And again, her first two albums, she was very angsty and punk. However, she had transitioned a little bit by her second album. But early on, she was very punk, very in that vein of artist. And as she changed, people felt like, oh, that's not the same person anymore. And so she started, feeling a lot of pressures of success. And her grandfather passes away in March of 2003. And she does pay a tribute in concert with this rendition of Tomorrow. But the story is that during this depression, she ends up taking her own life. So the management and team, they conspire to cover it all up. So they replace her with the decoy. Now, the decoy, they say, is Melissa Vandella. And I'll talk about who Melissa Vandella could be. Now, the other one is that she actually had a clone, that the decoy was there until they could get a viable clone of her, and then they could slide her into place. Now, one of the reasons that they say that is because there are image comparisons of Avril's face, and I'll show you some of these up here, why people think that they look different. There's one where there's like this scar or mole to the right above her right eyebrow that seems to disappear. I'll say this, that could easily be done in some sort of plastic surgery or any kind of surgery for that matter to remove that, right? So that's not necessarily something I would hang my hat on. So the next one is the writing style. And there's been a side-by-side comparison of an original writing style. And then they showed the latter writing style. And they said, look at them, they're different. I mean, they do look a little different. The problem is the quote unquote original writing style was in 2013, Well, that wouldn't work because she passed away in 2003. So it seems to be that a couple of these are pretty explainable with her. The other one is this whole Melissa Vandella. Now, I'm going to show you a picture of her and a Melissa, and there is a Melissa that used to run this avril.org, which is a fan site. And they actually ended up meeting. There was a whole donation that avril.org was trying to get for the Children's Hospital of UCLA. And because they were able to raise the money for that, Avril ended up taking a picture with Melissa. And you'll see also that she writes Melissa on her arm. And this is the reason why. At least we're being told, right? It seems to be that with this whole Avril Lavigne cloning theory, that a lot of it can be explained away. But one of the weirdest things that's hard to explain is Melissa Vandella. Now, we don't know her real last name. And Vandella was one that was given by the fans. And the thought pattern is that rhymes with Mandela. So this is a nod to the Mandela effect and that she was the fill-in. The problem is she doesn't look anything like her in the picture whatsoever. But again, you know, maybe they made a clone of Avril Lavigne. I don't know. This is one of the ones to me that I got a hard time with, the Avril Lavigne one. I think that I can look at that one and say probably not, but who knows, man, right? So Britney Spears, that's another one. And man, there were some websites out during that time, britneysdead.com. I mean, listen, Britney's been going off the hinges the past few years. So at the very least, I will say, I think that a lot of these child stars that came up through Disney, came up through the system, probably MK Ultra at the very least, right? Monarch programming, we can go down that road for sure. I think that is a viable explanation for a lot of erratic activity. Now, again, if somebody starts looking different, I don't know if Britney's ever really looked different. She looks older. I don't know if she's ever really looked different. The story is, though, that in 1998, and this was after Baby One More Time, that her and Justin got into a nasty car accident that caused Justin to have severe burns, and then it caused her to be decapitated. And they say that Justin is still in a coma, but they used his DNA to obviously make a clone of him, and then he just used her dead body's DNA to make a clone of her. And one of the big people that was coming out around 2011 that was saying that Britney was cloned, that had interactions with her, was who? Donald Marshall. As a matter of fact, Donald Marshall said he wrote songs for her. Again, I don't know if Donald Marshall could write songs or not. This is just the story that he's telling us. But there are a few things that are really weird. In 2009, she did a song called Break the Ice. And if you look at the imagery, which I'm showing you up here on the screen, it's literally her breaking out of a clone tube, and it's in anime style. And the entire video is based around her being a clone. And so Donald Marshall said that he helped her write this. And it's funny, even some of the lyrics to the song, which are highly sexualized, but if you read between the lines on it, it seems to be that it's talking about waking up from a tube that someone would be in who was being cloned, that this clone wakes up. She ends up blowing up the whole facility at the end. So, of course, they always give you that nice little happy ending in these movies, and yeah, they stop the bad guys, and it's the bad guys making the film or song that's saying that the, plebes like us actually beat them. So another celebrity that's always talked about being cloned is Eminem, right? So in 2006, he was supposedly died, and then they said he was replaced with a clone. Now, there was a gap of time where Eminem was off the grid, and his running mate died, Proof, who was a part of D12, and he was his hype man, and they came up together. This is before Eminem ever made it big. And he dies, and Eminem goes into a depression. He's already an addict, but he gets even worse, and he ODs. He's not doing well. And he reappears on the scene, and he seems to be different. Now, he could have lost weight because he had gained a whole lot of weight during that time. But there are some things, and I'll show you up on the screen. There are a few differences in the face. Now, we could just say he's gotten older, but I'll let you guys be the decider on what you think about if Eminem's a clone or not. I'm just bringing up names that people have talked about a whole lot that are actually clones. And here's the thing. When we're looking at people that could be cloned or people that have been replaced with people who are dressed in some sort of prosthetics or skin suit of them, it needs to be people of high importance. And I'm going to say this a million times. Every celebrity is not a clone. Every celebrity is not a fallen angel. Every celebrity is not something. Sometimes they're regular people. Sometimes they're people who are useful idiots. And what I mean by that is, hey, they show up on a music video set. We want you to dress up like the devil. We're going to have all this stuff in the background. They're like, all right, cool, whatever. I'm getting paid. There's plenty of people who will do that. They'll push whatever that the labels want to push or whoever else that's above them just to get paid. It's as simple as that. Everybody's not involved in something nefarious. Now, by them signing off and doing this stuff, they are definitely allowing these demonic entities to attach to them. They're definitely tied in somewhat, and they're probably doing some things behind the scenes that aren't good. But it doesn't mean that they are sacrificing children at night, not all of them. Again, you look at somebody like Jay-Z, look, man, you and I can have the conversation about that, right? Some of these high-level, high-profile people, we can have the conversation with. But when it comes to the mass group of actors and actresses, athletes, and politicians, look, a lot of them, they just do what they're told to get paid. And they don't have any scruples. They just don't have ethics. It's as simple as that. Again, guys, we got to have some sort of balance here. I'm willing to go there with you. I promise you. But it can't be everything. And I promise you, I'll never be one of these guys that promotes all the craziness just to promote it. I'm willing to shoot myself in the foot and just be the guy on the outside that people are like, he's always trying to disprove conspiracies. That's not what I'm trying to do at all. Like, I'm very open to cloning being real. I'm very open to skin suits being real. But we got to have a balance with it, or we just lose our minds. We just lose everything. Then we think we know everything, and then we just sit back like, I know more than everybody else, and I'm going to tell you right now. I hate that. Hate that pretentiousness from truthers. Ugh, that drives me more insane than mainstream normies with pretentiousness. That's even worse to me, because you should know better than to think you know everything, because you know you don't. So why do you act like you do? Now, one of the ones that Donald Marshall really gets into depth with is Miley Cyrus. And he said back in 2010 that Disney had her offed and dumped her remains in a California desert. But he said that he worked with her clone. And he also said that Miley Cyrus was refusing to mess around with some of the executives there. And one of the other ideas was, too, that she wouldn't partake in, like, blood orgies. So that's why they offed her. Maybe. But Marshall talks about that he was working with Miley Cyrus clone at the cloning center, and he was refusing to write songs for her to the point she was getting really mad about it. And then she said she was scared of the aliens, or the Vrilya, right? The Vril. And it gets even crazier. He said she pulled out a knife on him and was demanding him to write songs. And he just said, hey, go ahead and off me, because they've already made like 10 or 15 more of me. So he said he's been cloned a lot. So he just kind of laughed it off during this entire escapade. He talks about several others. Beyonce is one of them. And he said that she was a witch, which we seem to understand from a lot of the imagery that she's put in music videos. And, you know, she's definitely got some ties to what they call the Mothers of Darkness. And I do plan on doing an episode on the Mothers of Darkness here at some point. And he also talks about Paul McCartney. He talks about Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift's a very interesting one, too, because she does look a lot like Zena LaVey, which is Anton LaVey's daughter. And it said that she is the clone of Zena LaVey, and maybe, right? I don't know. I would say this, that if somebody was tied into secret societies or something like Anton LaVey, who started the Church of Satan, yeah, she probably would have access to something like that. And they may use her to make a clone of somebody and turn them into somebody famous. It's a possibility, right? I won't put it past the level of possibility, but we can't say for sure. And there's a lot of people running around out there saying for sure. And to that point, we're going to talk about celebrity doppelgangers. And this is one that I've had several people reach out to me about and say, there's some big accounts out there and they're saying that, people from the past are fallen angels and they're the same people now. And they're just changing names and okay, again, slow down. We'll go through it and I'll tell you what I think about it because again, we'll go there today. I'm not going to sit here and discount everything that's out there, but we have to have, again, balance, guys, balance. So let's look at some of these people and obviously I'll have them up here on the screen on YouTube and Rumble. All right, so let's look at some of these celebrities that look like people from the past, and you'll see these going around, doing the rounds, and people saying that they are these people from the past. So we got Nicolas Cage, and he looks like a Confederate prisoner of war, and this is Lieutenant Robert M. Smith. And listen, they look a lot alike. And I'm not here to say that some of these don't look a lot alike, but here's what I also want to say. How many times have you heard that people have doppelgangers of themselves? I've seen people that look like me that other people have seen out and said, man, I thought that was you. It's very possible that this person just looks like Nicolas Cage. Let's always keep that there because one thing about these content creators that say verbatim that these celebrities are these people from the past, they have nothing to back it up outside of the fact that they look alike. That's it. That's all they have. They have nothing else they can point to. They can't say, well, this person from the past was acting like this person here. You don't even know what that dude talked like or acted like or moved like. All you see is a picture. Here's a good one for you. A lot of these people also believe in alternative history, which I do too. What's to say that this wasn't created and put into the zeitgeist to say, oh, this looks like Nicolas Cage. Whoa! And it's not even a real person. I'm just saying, look at all possibilities before you start saying that every single celebrity is a fallen angel. We've got John Travolta. And again, they don't even know who this guy is. It's a 150-year-old photo of a man. And he looks kind of like John Travolta. We got Keanu Reeves. And he looks like Paul Monet, a French actor from the 19th century. They look similar. We got Serena Williams, and she resembles civil rights advocate Betty Shabazz. Okay. I don't see that one as much. Now, this one is kind of interesting to me. Jack Black looks like Paul Revere. Similar. I can see it. Got Andrew Garfield. Looks like Leon Trotsky of a Marxist school of thought. I mean, I don't know. That one to me, okay, maybe. We've got Brad Pitt, and he looks like Hermann Rorschach. He was a 19th century Swiss psychologist and developed the Rorschach test. According to this picture I'm showing you right now, they have the same taste in neckwear. I don't know. That's a tie, and that's more like an ascot, if anything. Do they look similar? They look similar. You could say that. Jay-Z one is very interesting. The New York Public Library's Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, they posted a photo of the Harlem Loiters. And this one unidentified man looks a lot like Jay-Z. He does. He looks a lot like him. But it doesn't mean there weren't other guys during that period of time that may have looked like Jay-Z throughout history. And who was this guy? Unidentified man. We don't know. We got Bruce Willis, looks like Douglas MacArthur, the five-star general who led the United States and its allies in World War II. They look similar. Now, this was interesting right here. So we have Peter Dinklage. And he resembles the figure in Spanish painter Diego Velázquez's 1645 painting titled Dwarf Sitting on the Floor. I mean, even the facial hair looks very similar. But Dinklage also looks a lot like Velázquez himself. So here's what I thought. Is it Velázquez's homunculus, his little man that he created? Just throwing that out there. If we're gonna go down this weird, crazy road right here, let's just throw it all out there, right? Maybe Peter Dinklage is a homunculus that was created in the 1600s, and he's been around this whole time. We've got Mark Zuckerberg, and he was also painted by Velázquez. And this is a painting of Philip IV of Spain. I mean, they look sort of like. I mean, listen, Mark Zuckerberg is like a robot, an android anyway. So I wouldn't even know if it's a clone. Like, is it a robot? And here's one that'll get the EGI people all worked up. Ellen DeGeneres looks like Henry David Thoreau, and he was of the abolitionist movement. So maybe, I mean, she is gay, so she would fit the bill in this whole EGI world, right? Look, I'm going there today, guys. I'm going there. So the people that like to hear all the crazy, wild stuff, I'm going there. I'm giving you the opportunity. So there's a few of them, right? There's a few. Another big one is Morgan Freeman is Jimi Hendrix. That one right there, and I have seen some content creators say verbatim, that's it. And one in particular was like, it is, very smugly, if anybody even disagreed with it. Like, how do you know? How do you know? They don't even talk alike. They changed the voice inflections too. They change all this stuff. I mean, there's just so many plot holes. Not to mention the fact that Morgan Freeman was alive when Jimi Hendrix was alive. Because Jimi Hendrix lived from November 27th, 1942 to September 18, 1970. And Morgan Freeman was born on June the 1st, 1937, which means that he was alive during the entire time that Jimi Hendrix was alive. I mean, where they got multiple clones out there? Maybe. Maybe Jimi Hendrix is a clone of a clone of a clone, and so is Morgan Freeman. But Jimi Hendrix was not prior to Morgan Freeman. But again, people are so willing to lap this up without even looking into it just a little bit. So you want to know what I think about all this? So I'm going to give the possibility, because people want to know what I think about the fallen angel thing, because for some reason, that is red hot right now. Fallen angels biblically can shapeshift. We know that. They can look like human beings. And I've talked about that plenty of times on the show. Could they have taken a particular genetic makeup that they've used throughout time to play different characters? It's possible. I'm not going to say it's not. It is possible. But is it on a wide scale like people are making out to be? I highly doubt it, guys. I highly doubt it. At some point, there's real people out there, guys. We're flesh and blood, real people. It's not all reptilians and it's not all fallen angels. So my thoughts on that is on a low scale of likely, okay? In my opinion, when it looks to be some sort of cloning or some sort of acting by someone else who's in some sort of skin suit or whatever, then it's something a little bit easier for us to wrap our minds around. So I think that the cloning aspect of it is they're not cloning the consciousness. I don't think that they're swapping consciousness, in my opinion. Now, I know there's some ideas out there about how consciousness can be transferred. And I did talk about REM cloning and how souls could possibly be transferred. I still don't know how I feel about all that because things still have to work in the way that God wants them to work. I'm a Christian, so I'm not going to step outside of what God allows. So again, that's the caveat. It's possible. I think more or less this. I think there is cloning going on. I think it works more in the meat sack theory that I've talked about, that there is a clone created that is a host for an entity. So these demonic entities, which we've heard, can also manipulate the makeup of someone that they're in, could help a person shapeshift in a way. We know some people have grown taller or their face has been contorted in different ways. There are so many aspects to the supernatural that we don't have a full grasp on. So we just taking stabs at the dark right now. But I think if we're looking at, say, you created a clone in a facility of someone, I'm thinking that you're creating it for something else to be hosted in it. When it comes to the skin suit, it's probably a person, an actor who can act at least close enough to that person to be able to pull it off, which I think that both are very possible, especially when we look at alchemical writings throughout history and the idea of pulling spirits from the astral, from another realm, and putting them into bodies. We know this because we have writings for this. The fallen angel part is just us saying, okay, I know that they can look like people in the Bible, so now I'm just going to say that they've been this one person throughout history. I don't know, guys. Have people found a way to extend their lifetime with alchemy? That's possible too. If you want to go down that road and you say that, okay, somebody has extended their life for 200, 300 years, 400 years, and they're the same person, and they've just changed their names and they've, updated themselves as society updates. Maybe. Again, I'll throw that out there too, but I really feel like your two most plausible ideas are clones, which we know they can do, that they've admitted they can do, but I think they're host for demonic spirits. And then I think you've also got the idea of the skin suit, which we know people, especially with prosthetics the way they are now, there are people that can pull it off. That's my take on it, guys. Some people may like it, some people may not. I try to have a level head with this wild stuff, even though I'm very open to a lot of the wild stuff for sure. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really had a blast today, guys. I'm having a really good time with putting out all kinds of new content. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. See you next time.